last-minute shakeup at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning, Ryan. It's okay.
And staying in front of the day isn't always as simple as 1, 2, 3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
what's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
You're listening to Random Fit with hosts Wendy Batts and Ken Miller, winner of a Gold Markham Award for Digital Media.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Random Fit. I am Wendy Batts, here with my friend and co-host, Ken Miller. Kenneth, how are you?
I am great, Wendy. How you doing?
I am good.
Yes.
Today, we are going to actually talk about beyond setting up straight. I don't know how many of you guys have really tried to think about when you're at a desk or you're sitting in a chair that you look down at your feet and they're pointed straight ahead and you have a nice upright back and your shoulders are back and your head are in line with your shoulders. To me, that feels extremely unnatural and very uncommon. I know when I look around, I don't see that very often, but my mother used to tell me all the time as a child, sit up straight, make sure your feet are straight. And I had no idea what she was talking about, but apparently there's something behind all of that.
Yeah, well, Wendy, every time we record one of our podcasts, our producer, Eric, likes to say, hey, Ken, don't lean forward. Don't lean forward. I mean, that's just not a framing issue as far as my head getting too close to the camera. But I appreciate it because it forces me to really think, okay, well, yeah, I do have a tendency to lean forward, and part of it's just reading what's on the screen, but it forces me to keep my head up, shoulders back, and I don't quite think about the abs being in a nice neutral position. But just like you, Wendy, I have Eric in my ear, but my mom would say the same thing, right? And it does mean something, especially now that, you and I both have kids, and I see both of my children, they have that, they're not paying attention. They're eating dinner, their heads forward, they're slouching forward. I'm like, come on now, let's go. So I have become my mom as your words ring in your ears too.
Well, and I think it's important too, like what we're really going to talk a lot about is just posture in general. And I think sometimes we take it for granted. And when, as a trainer, especially an NASM trainer, we really teach people from the very start that an assessment is one of the most important things that you can do with a client and or yourself. And if you are a fitness enthusiast, you don't have any desire to get a trainer, this episode is still for you, because this is something that you can do. It's like a self-check on your own by just standing in front of a mirror. And without thinking about it, if you walk in front of a mirror and you stand, what do you see? And what I tell people to do is just stand in front of the mirror and take a screen, take a selfie, a full body selfie. And then I want you to sit down in a chair, how you're comfortable, not how you think you should be, and do the same thing. And that's what we call static posture. What happens when you're not moving and what's comfortable for you? Because we can learn a lot about somebody without even doing movement. But it's actually really surprising because when we get into more of the dynamic posture, which is posture with movement, how sometimes they can be very, very different. Because I know my clients will tell me I'm at my desk and I have done all the ergonomic stuff. I'm sitting as properly and my position is perfect. But then when they stand up, they're a hot mess. So I like to do both. I tell people, I want you to sit, I want you to stand, and I want you to take a picture and then send it to me. And then I can analyze it. And then I know how they're moving because they're coming to see me and I've already done my assessment, but I want to see throughout some of the changes if they notice a difference.
And I think, Wendy, you bring up a great point there when you talk about them, looking at a mirror, taking a screenshot, and all that is feedback. And I think, and you tell me what your thoughts are, but when I've walked into a gym, a lot of times the mirror has just been used for guys that are wearing their tank top and they're flexing in the mirror and they're doing, they're doing that bicep curl, right? That alternating dumbbell bicep curl, and they're looking down at each arm, right, as each arm is doing that one little curl. But now, I mean, okay, I'll admit I was one of those guys when I was in my teens and in my 20s, but Now it's more about getting the feedback. And I have mirrors on two of my walls. They span two walls in my facility. And I have my clients stand in front of the mirror, and I'll stand next to my client. We're both looking at our reflections, and I'll say, okay, here's what I want you to see in the mirror. I want you to see that your head is stacked, level on top of your shoulder blades. Your shoulder blades are level. Your hips are level. And just a couple hours ago with my last client, I had, put their hands on their hips as they're balancing on one leg, and see that your hips are level. So when you're talking about posture, we are talking about spine. In that case, it's a single leg balance posture. I want shoulders level, hips level, and then hip, knee, and toe on that stance leg to be in line vertically. And so now my perspective on using the mirror, using that as feedback to where if I start to see one shoulder dip forward, or what I tell my clients is, when you're looking at your head position, I want you to see both ears, because there is a slight subtle difference to where if I turn my head even a little bit, one ear disappears and one ear I see more of. And that's just telling me that I'm rotating more. So, and I guess to expand on your one point, Wendy, is like when we heard growing up, sit up straight, we're more talking about, in that case, just getting away from that flexed position where my spine is flexed, my shoulders are forward, my head is forward. But in that example where you kind of see one ear and the other ear disappears in the mirror, now we're talking about a rotation. So just to give us some perspective too on posture, is that it's not just a one-dimensional forward and backward setup from your ears to your tailbone, but it is also a rotational situation to where, again, I could rotate to the right or to the left. It just depends on what you do, especially when you're talking about throwers or people that have a bias to where they have to reach forward with one hand more than they have the other. And that creates an imbalance from a rotational standpoint. So I think one thing that having a mirror does is it gives you that ability to kind of see where you stand in 3 dimensions, and then based on what you know to be ideal, based on your instruction, right? If you're seeing a personal trainer or knowing what you need to look for in the mirror, then you can make your adjustments and kind of use that mirror as a way of, okay, this is where I am, this is where I need to be. Let me just make this adjustment, XYZ, and then I can be in a better position for as long as I can hold that.
Well, and I find it interesting because in the very beginning, we do something called subjective information, where I sit down with the client, I ask them what their daily activities are, what they do for a living. And it's very interesting because, Ken, I don't know if you have this happen, but let's say that I have a stay-at-home mom that comes in and she's got 3 kids. And it never fails when I'm talking to them. I don't have them look in the mirror to do it. I just say, okay, I want, as they're talking to me, if they're standing, I'm saying, I'm going to take a quick picture of you. And I don't let them move. I just take a picture of how they're comfortable at talking to me if they're not in a seated position. And the reason why I do that, and the reason I bring up a stay-at-home mom, is because moms are very active. If you have 3 kids, bless you, first and foremost. I have one and done. Like, that was it. I don't know how people do the multiple thing, because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of stress on the body. But oftentimes a mom will shift to one side because they're holding a baby and they're doing some type of cleaning, or they're grabbing another child, or they're doing something else too. So oftentimes, like you said, that it's not really just a rotation thing. It can be just even from the frontal plane or the front view, more of a shift to one side than the other, or they have one leg that may turn out because that's kind of their post leg, if you will. And so I find it to be very interesting, but just the static posture alone can tell us a lot about the stress that's being placed on joints without movement, minimizing the movement and minimizing, the rest periods, what's happening at the body when you're supposed to be not putting a lot of strain and stress on it because you're not moving. And so you get a lot of information from that. Now looking at the other side of it, when we talk about dynamic posture, that is actually your posture and movement. And NASM is very big on something called the 5 kinetic chain checkpoints, which again, we start at the feet, we work our way up. So if you're standing, your toes should be pointed forward, hip to shoulder width apart, not wider, not, think about those 2 bones on your hips. They should go straight down. And that second, third toe and the knee and the hip bone should all line straight up. And to your point, Ken, abs are in, shoulders are back, and head, as you say, are stacked over the shoulders. That is ideal. But it's interesting because it's very uncomfortable for a lot of people because it seems, quote, unnatural. And I hear this all the time. Well, my body doesn't move that way, or I've never stood this way, or this is just really awkward. Was because your body starts to go to the path of least resistance. What does it know? And these compensation patterns happen over time. It can start happening at birth. It can start happening at a young age based on sports or how they're sitting or what's happening at school or whatever the case may be. And as we get older, that's just what we know. So what we do is we put an individual in that position first, and then we have them raise their hands overhead without a bend in the elbow if they can, and we have them squat down 5 times, and we look from the front to the side and the back. Seems very basic, but that information alone can tell you so much about how a person is moving correctly or incorrectly, and then that's how we take that information and design a specific program to help correct any imbalances that we may see. Plus, it gives us feedback. Like you said, it's all about feedback. So a mirror kind of tells us how you're just standing, but a squat, and even having them squat in front of a mirror after you tell them, okay, now try to get in that position. We put them there to start because we need to see where anything kind of starts to change. And then I say, just squat how you're comfortable. And the first thing usually that happens when their calves are tight, their feet will go out. Or if they sit a lot or they run a lot or something and their hips are tight, they will have this arch in their back, or they will slightly lean forward. If they round their shoulders and have a forward head, their arms a lot of times come forward, or their neck goes forward, and they don't even realize it's happening. And so it's very good information to have both the static and the dynamic. But then we take both of those information. We see if there's any differences or anything that parallels, and then it starts to tell the story.
And that story is, and that's the foundation, Wendy. I use that overhead squat assessment as a way to kind of communicate, because nothing helps them kind of best understand where they are, because like you said, when they're in that position, their whole waking day, from the moment they sit down there, and that's what they acclimate to. That is their zero reference. That's their starting point. So to get somebody to go into a novel and new position, like an overhead position, and then as you described so well, Wendy, you put your feet in this forward, second and third toe pointing at 12 o'clock straight ahead. I mean, I don't know what your clients tell you, but mine always say, especially the first time I assess and evaluate them, is they said, it's like, man, I feel pigeon-toed.
Oh,
well,
100%.
So they've calibrated their foot position, their feet turned out as where they feel centered, where they feel that that's neutral. But the second you go from out to straight ahead, in their mind, it's like going from straight ahead to pigeon-toed. And that's when they feel the tightness in their hips. That's when they feel the restrictions in their ankles. And then when you go through that squat motion and the feet start to peel out, because, okay, now they're playing to where they are a little restricted. They may have some immobility through the foot and ankle, as that typically happens. Not always, but typically. And that's the start of the education process. And what I like to drive home with my clients or new clients is the fact that if we don't address posture, and this is the point I try to drive home with them, however you're holding self, if your shoulders are forward and your spine is flexed, the second I put a dumbbell in your hand, you're only going to be a stronger, relatively stronger version of that compensated position. So if your feet are turned out, if your hips are tilted forward, if you got that excessive arch in the back, or you're slouching forward through the upper spine, the second I load your spine, I put a dumbbell in your hand, I have you lunge, whatever the motion may be, you're going to be a stronger version of that. You're only going to magnify that compensation, which, yeah, everybody gets stronger in the beginning until you don't. And when you don't, it's because you've reached your capacity for strength and power, because you're not capitalizing on any stabilization training that could happen. And stabilization, right, your ability to control those joints in that optimal position, as you said, Wendy, with those kinetic chain checkpoints, ankles, knees, hips, shoulders, and ears, putting all of those points in alignment. If you can't do that, then you're not maximizing every muscle fiber, from those type 1 to type 2 muscle fibers that are responsible for strength and power with the type 2, but also the type 1 that's responsible for maintaining integrity of the joint. And when you can't maintain stability of the joint with addressing posture, you're going to cap out sooner than later, and actually increasing your potential for injury. So you can never predict when someone's going to get hurt, but you can address those factors that contribute to having a higher level of potential for injury. And that's why we want to look at posture. So I take that example of, a bigger, stronger version of this poor posture from my friend from a long time ago, Tony Gray, who's used, I don't know if he's in the industry anymore, but I digress.
Yeah, well, and I think it's
Yeah.
important too, because we talk about this in the very beginning with our clients. We make them aware. Moving forward, this is how I want you to set up for everything. When you're at the grocery store, look down, check your feet. When you're sitting in your car, look at where your head is in relation to the headrest. Hopefully the headrest isn't pushing you forward, and if so, you can turn it backwards. So if you're in a wreck, you're still okay, but you're also not being pushed into a compensation just because of the way that car was made. Literally, we've taken the headrest and turned ours backwards. Just because ours did tilt everything forward, and we couldn't change the way that the car was made. And so that's something that you can do. But we do that because we're retraining our brain. So think about a computer, right? We're programming good information in. And what you're doing with good information in is going to lead to good information out. And it just takes time. So if people feel very uncomfortable, because it takes the body anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks to change. And so it's not something that's going to happen overnight. However, you have to work towards it, and it has to be something that's on the forefront all the time until that becomes the new challenge and the new you. And then you can move on to bigger and better things. But if we have optimal alignment, it's less stress on the joint, and you're going to have optimal movement because you're going to have more power production because the muscle is in proper length to move the way that it was intended to move. So Ken, there are some questions, like some myths and stuff like that I've heard. I know you and I jotted some we jotted some down, and we're going to share them with each other. But before we do that, I do want to say that this episode of Random Fit with myself, Wendy Batts, and Ken Miller, we are talking about beyond setting up straight. So we're really focusing on posture. And this particular episode is brought to you by NASM1, which is the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources. Get the Edge app to schedule and program clients, enjoy half off all certifications and specializations, access free CEUs, and more. All of this for just $35 a month. So just go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM1. So Ken, first myth, and I love this one too. Good posture means standing or sitting perfectly straight all the time.
All the time, without fail. I'm going to move from this position. I'm going to turn this way. I'm going to turn this way. No, I think false. When it comes to that myth, it's about control, right? And that's the difference between the static and the dynamic. And it's one thing to be, you're going to slouch, you're going to lean forward, your head's going to tilt forward, your back is going to arch. And the real part of it is that, can you get into that ideal posture from that less than ideal posture? It's just when we, like, as you've described already, it's the awareness of your body position. It's the neuromuscular control as far as being able to use the right muscles at the right time. And that way we have that efficient movement within the joint. So it's not that, you'd have to be one big type 1 muscle fiber to be in this posture all the time, right? But you have to move. And from that vantage point, I just tell my clients, yeah, fine. If you find yourself flexing, just remember what it takes for you to get into that better ideal posture until it becomes easier. So you don't have to be there all the time. But I do want to make sure that if you wanted to be in that ideal posture, ears, shoulders, and hips, if you're in that seated position, that you have the control, you have the endurance to get there and be there for an extended period of time. If you're like a lot of people that live behind a computer, and you're behind the computer 8-9 hours a day, and then if you have an hour commute each way, you're sitting down for 10 plus hours, and no one has that type of postural endurance. But we just want to see that you are working on it. You can bring up those you can raise those techniques that help you kind of reflect and acknowledge the posture that you're in and kind of make the adjustments when necessary. So you don't have to, but if you need to, when you need to, then you can get into that ideal posture.
Yes.
Yes, true.
True.
So here's one for you, Wendy, and I've got that I've got a good section of active aging clientele. Now here's the one myth is that postural problems only affect older people. What do you say to that?
Well, then they obviously have not been around children with a tablet for very long. And unfortunately, like we go to dinner as a family very often, really more than we should. Just says a lot about my cooking if that says anything. But and it's amazing. I'll look around a restaurant and people that have younger children oftentimes will just put a tablet in front of them and they'll turn on Blippy or some sort of TV show or something that they're just, the kids are like, their heads are forward and they're just so engaged in whatever it is that's on. And first of all, that drives me crazy. It's like one of my super big pet peeves, because as a family, you should embrace everyone that's in there, even if there are some that are acting up, and you want to teach them how to act, at a young age at a restaurant. I digress. However, my point of this being that it unfortunately is starting more and more, and you see so many studies out there that kids are starting to develop more and more compensation patterns that like never before. And unfortunately, it's because now of the devices. I know when I was in elementary school, I didn't have a computer or a tablet. We did everything with a piece of paper and a pencil. And now my son, who is in 3rd grade, has his own computer at school, and then is asked to come home and do some homework on a tablet that is connected to the school. So therefore, everything is done electronically. That sounds great. It's super easy for the teachers to keep everything without having all this paper, right? We're saving trees, but we're killing posture at the same time. And so, yes, we see it a lot in the elderly, because unfortunately we've done a ton of different podcasts talking about how we start to lose muscle mass and things start to decline, including what's happening with our spine, obviously degenerative disc disease, osteoporosis, osteopenia, all of the things that happen, unfortunately, as we age. We're trying to change that. However, it is unfortunately with all ages. And that's why it doesn't matter if you walk in my doors, we automatically do an assessment no matter what, because I'm probably going to see compensation patterns based on sports, based on shoes, based on the clothes that they're wearing, based on how they sit. And then, of course, just the day-to-day, even how they sleep. Because think about somebody sleeping. If they are a stomach sleeper, think about what's happening to their neck. If they are a side sleeper, most people bring their knees up closer to their stomach, or they will sometimes bring one knee up, leave one knee down. They sleep with an arm up over their pillow. A lot of these times, if they're sleeping for 8 hours a day, that they're in that position about that amount of time too. So it's not just what's happening when we're awake. It's things that we're obviously not even aware of that our body will start to take in as, oh, this is comfortable. Why don't we say that this is the new way to sit, stands, or whatever. So false. The answer, false. How about that? All right. How about this? Because I think this gets a really bad rep. And we have seen it from some of our trainers that are like, you guys are teaching things about static stretching. So what about static stretching? Is that the best way, Ken? If we're talking about improving posture, their compensation patterns we see, meaning they're not properly lined up in those 5 kinetic chain checkpoints, is static stretching the way to go?
It's a start, right? It's somewhere to begin. So if you've assessed the client, you understand where their muscles are a little bit overactive, doing a little too much, and certain joints can stand to move a little bit better, a little bit more free, stand a little bit more range of motion, like the ankles, like the front of the hip, like the front of the shoulder. It's the place to start. And you can start with a program where you're going to use some kind of self-myofascial technique. Static stretching is the stretch of choice when it comes to addressing muscles that are just neurologically doing too much. But it's only part of the picture. And when it comes to that, I can do all the stretching I want, but if I don't have the strength and the neuromuscular control through those muscles that are, are complementarily weak or underactive, that they're not doing their job as far as being able to hold myself upright. So we are talking about those muscles around the shoulder blades. We're talking about the muscles on the back side of the shoulder. We're talking about the deeper muscles towards the spine. And when those muscles fail to activate, when those muscles fail to stay, because their job is to stabilize, and that's what you need to do to be able, those muscles are the ones that need to wake up a little bit, to wake up to hold those joints in the best position possible relative to the other joints, like the muscles in the neck that hold the head over the rib cage, the muscles in the glenohumeral joint or the shoulder capsule here that holds it back on the rib cage. So it's one thing for these tighter muscles to open them up and get that stretch so that we can move through that range of motion. But that's, I don't want to say even half the picture, because we have to have the activation of those deeper muscles, but we also have to have the coordination. So if I need to move from that seated position, I need to be able to use the right muscles at the right time with the right force in the right direction. And that's what we call movement or neuromuscular efficiency. So stretching, great start, better than doing nothing, but there has to be a complementary strengthening that goes along with that flexibility that you just worked for if you did the static stuff. So yes, you need to do the stretch, but you also need to do the strengthening.
Good answer.
Yeah.
I concur.
Yeah. So here's one for you when it comes to beyond sitting up straight, Wendy. Back pain is always caused by poor posture.
No. I mean, the word always is going to throw.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's always going to be the fact that I know of at this point. And I always tell people to try to prove me different by saying, if I do this, this is always going to happen. More than likely, or they're commonly, yes. I mean, if there is low back pain, meaning that, let's say there's an arch in the lower back. When somebody sits at their desk and their hips are tight and they go to stand up, if their hips are still, like those hip flexors are still in a shortened position, it moves the hips in a forward position. And so some people, we all have a natural curve in the lower back, but that natural curve becomes more excessive. And so what we call an excessive forward lean is just when the torso moves forward, but an excessive low back arch is literally where you're going to notice as they start to move, that arch gets more enhanced, or you can see it more visually, or it got bigger than it was before, especially if they raise their arms and stuff, just because of where the lats insert in the lower back. So the thing is if we have ideal posture, we're not putting as much stress on the lumbar spine. If we do have poor posture, such as what I just talked about with that arch, that compression does start to eventually cause more and more discomfort that can lead to, quote, pain. So if you have ideal alignment and you don't have the stress to those lumbar spine, that's fine. But if you also have a very weak core, but your alignment is good, then over time, what happens is we start to maybe have one side that might be more active than the other because we're more dominant. We're doing more repetitive motion on one side. So what happens with our lumbar and our disc and our lumbar, right? Think of a jelly donut. If I have one side that starts to become more and more active and it starts to get tighter and tighter and tighter, it then starts to put more compression on that disc. And that's when we hear people say, oh, I've got a bulging disc. I've got this tingling going down my arm now, and I've got this happening and this happening. Well, it's because there's compression now that's happening on that disc because the vertebrae on one side might be getting tighter and it's causing that discomfort. So it's not always about poor posture. It could be the fact that, and when I say jelly donut, the reason why I say that is because eventually if there's too much pressure, the jelly explodes, and most people know what a jelly donut looks like. If not, you're missing out. You should try to get one and then just try this. Do it for an experiment. Do it for the sake of science. But at the same time, when you're thinking about that compression over time, it might not have been about posture, but it's the repetitive motion that will eventually affect your posture and then cause discomfort. So it's hard to say, chicken versus egg. Is it because overactive muscles are causing that discomfort, or the weaker muscles are allowing that to happen? It's usually a combination, as you said, of both. If there is a compensation at the big toe, it can affect what's happening at your shoulder. And that's why you want to be very holistic and look at everything, and not just segmental of, oh, my lower back hurts and it's just my back. It's like, well, what's causing that? And so that's one of the reasons I love being a trainer, is because it's always a puzzle. Everyone's different. There's a lot of commonalities, but the thing is sometimes it can be foam roll your piriformis. Sometimes it'll lay off of that compression that may be on the sciatic nerve, and the discomfort goes away. Sometimes it's because the glutes are so weak and the hips are so tight that it just takes time. So it's also, what can we do to alleviate some of this discomfort quickly? But then what are we going to have to do to make sure it doesn't come back? I don't know if I answered your question, but
yeah,
I'm sticking to that.
Well, and all I know now is that I want chicken, eggs, and the jelly donut, and
well, there you go.
Throw a cup of coffee in there, and I think I'm good to go.
Well, there you have it. Well, Ken, I know we could probably talk about this forever. And I mean, I know when we were saying, like, write down some of these common myths that you hear, you and I came back with like pages of them, but maybe we'll have to do a part 2. I don't know.
And just because, I mean, you and I talk about posture all the time, not to each other. We have other things to talk about, but when it comes to talking to our clients, I mean, I know I sound like a broken record when it comes to talking to my clients, because, they have a mirror on the right, their mirror in front. It's like, take a look at your posture. Take a look at your posture. Let's go ahead and, if they can identify it, they can get in there. But I think this is a great start as far as addressing those postural, those questions that you and I just went over, as far as the myths or some of the questions that our wonderful clients come to us with. And it is an educational process. You and I have been around it for over 25 years each, but for a lot of people, it's the first time hearing about posture in this context. And if you have fitness and performance and wellness and want to live a pain-free life, you can't do any of the things you need to do for any one of those goals without addressing the foundation of posture, which is why you and I are talking about it today. So hopefully you listeners of the Random Fit podcast with both Wendy Batts and I, Ken Miller, you got something out of this, and we'll have another episode definitely on posture. So if you liked what you listened to today, like, follow, subscribe, download, comment, give us a 5 out of 5 when you can. But most importantly, let us know what you want us to talk about in future episodes, and we'll get it on Random Fit Podcast. So until next time, everybody, take care and be well.